Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Occasionally, testimonies approximately Hollywood are filled with drama that never made it to the screen. And in terms of Nancy Culp and Buddy Ebsen, well, their tale is the kind that makes you lean in a touch nearer before the Beverly Hillbillies threw these into the identical spotlight. Their lives were already full of the kind of experiences that might fill whole books. But right here's the issue: what passed off earlier than that? Iconic display, honestly, sets the degree for the tension that simmered between them later on. I'll start with Nancy. She wasn't your traditional Hollywood famous person born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She became the handiest infant of Robert and Marjorie Culp. Her dad turned into a traveling salesman, always at the move while her mom juggled coaching and later have become a college essential. Nancy grew up in a world of structure and education, moving to Miami while she became nonetheless younger. Through 1943, she'd earned a degree in journalism and seemed set for a lifestyles behind the pen instead of in front of the digicum. But Nanny's journey wasn't directly shot. She changed into writing for the Miami Beach Tropics, a neighborhood paper, interviewing big names like Clark Gable and royalty, just like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Now, not exactly small potatoes proper. Then World War II came calling and Nancy failed to hesitate. She left her research to join the United States Naval Reserve, image her young, and decided in comes the rank of lieutenant while serving her U.S.A. No, let's pause there for a 2D and flip the coin to Buddy Ebsen. He changed into as unique from Nancy as you could get. Born and raised in Orlando, Florida, Paul dreamed of dancing when he and his sister Vilma hit the vaudeville circuit. They have been construct as the child of Stairs' friend, had this easy laid lower back, charm humans cherished looking him dance, but existence wasn't all easy cruising. When Buddy were given to New York with slightly sufficient money to take hold of a sandwich, he knew he needed to hustle. The hustle paid off, Broadway came calling, and soon Hollywood wasn't a long way in the back of Buddy. Landed roles in musicals, danced with Shirley Temple, or even got apped by Walt Disney himself to help animate Mickey Mouse's actions. But things were not usually so magical. Buddy's profession hit a main snag when he changed into forged as the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. It sounds like a dream gig right now. Not so much the makeup they used had aluminum dust, and it almost killed him. He ended up within the sanatorium, and the function went to a person else. After that, Pal became to other gigs, which includes sailing and teaching naval officials in the course of World War II. He might have been easygoing, but life had given him his fair share of KNX. Now photograph Nancy and Buddy, human beings from completely exclusive worlds, each with their own quirks and drive. By the time the 1950s rolled round, Nancy had moved to Hollywood. She'd gotten married, although it didn't, closing and brought activity in MGM's exposure department, a director notice. Her in concept she had the face for performing quickly. She turned into popping up in small roles, playing everything from a maid on I Love Lucy to a drunken waitress on Maverick. Nancy wasn't a main woman, but she had this knack for stealing scenes along with her sharp wit and Noon's mindset. Meanwhile, Buddy changed into busy carving out a space for himself in television. He had a knack for playing folksy, down-to-earth characters that audiences could not help but love. He'd already constructed a recognition as a person reliable, someone smooth to paintings, with as a minimum. It really is how he got here throughout to most oldsters. But right, here's in which things get thrilling. Through the past due 50s, Nancy and Buddy's paths had started crossing inside the international of television. They weren't precisely operating facet by using aspect. Yet, however, the metropolis wasn't that big. Nancy became incomes a reputation as a clever, hard-working actress. However, she additionally had robust evaluations and wasn't afraid to talk her mind. Buddy then again become known for being greater conventional, perhaps even a chunk old-fashioned passioned in his views, earlier than the Beverly Hillbillies. Got here, alongside, each had been chasing possibilities, anywhere they might. Nancy had a string of guest spots on famous shows. She didn't have the everyday Hollywood appearance, and he or she knew it, but that did not prevent her. She leaned into her unique style, gambling, quirky, memorable characters. Buddy in the meantime was bouncing between westerns, dramas, and the occasional comedy. He wasn't afraid to tackle roles that confirmed a darker facet, either playing villains on shows like Gunsmoke and Maverick. With the aid of the early 1960s, each had made their mark in Hollywood, of their very own methods, but neither of them had determined that big breakout role. Yet, that become approximately to change of route with the Beverly Hillbillies. When the Beverly Hillbillies hit TV monitors, it become like a rocket blasting off human beings could not get. Enough of the Clampetts, this easy backwards circle of relatives, suddenly surrounded by means of Beverly Hills. Glitz the show was humorous, charming, and a piece ridiculous, and it hooked tens of millions of visitors week after week at the middle of it. Nancy Culp and Buddy Ebsen, when the creators of the Beverly Hillbillies had been casting, they knew they needed a person unique to play Jane Hathaway, the efficient bird-looking secretary who works for Mr. Dayloth, Clampett's banker. Nancy changed into an excellent healthy, and Buddy properly by means of, then he became a familiar face in the industry. High seas I going. Demeanor and knack for gambling's smart fatherly characters made him an apparent desire for Jed Clampett. Jed was the spine of the Clampett own family. A man with little formal schooling, however, lots of common sense friend added warm temperature and allure to the function, making Jed someone visitors felt they might consider and root for when the show premiered. It became an instant hit. Human beings cherished the fish. Out of water tale of a own family from the Ozark putting oil and getting into a Beverly Hills mansion. The Clampetts weren't just funny. They had been relatable. Their easy ways clashing with the extravagance of Beverly Hills created all types of hilarious misunderstandings. And right there within the middle of it all was Nancy Culp as Miss Jane. Miss Jane wasn't just any secretary. She became clever, unswerving, and often the voice of cause, while Mr. Dale, her boss, got a touch too grasping. She certainly cared about the Clampetts, specifically Jed's nephew Jethro, and if you have ever watched the display, Miss Jane had a bit of a way down on Jethro. Nancy performed her with any such blend of humor and coronary heart that you could not help but love her. She even earned an Emmy nomination for the position. Buddy's portrayal of Jed changed into simply as iconic. Jed was the glue, maintaining the family collectively. At the same time as Granny stirred up trouble, Ellie Mae charmed absolutely everyone with her sweetness, and Jethro bumbled his manner through one wild scheme. After another, Jed stayed calm. He was the voice of cause in a circle of relatives, full of chaos, and that catchphrase of his properly domestic dogs have become a part of American popular culture. But here's in which matters get a little complicated. On display screen, Nancy and Buddy's characters, Hader, warm, pleasant, relationship off-screen, not a lot. The anxiety between them did not come from their appearing styles or their professionalism. No, it become something deeper, their personalities, and extra importantly, their perspectives on the global, clashed in approaches that could not be overlooked. You see, Friend was politically conservative and he failed to pull away from sharing his opinions. Nancy, on the opposite hand, leaned more liberal. It wasn't just a distinction of opinion, it changed into an essential divide in how they saw the international. Now imagine working with someone each day who stands for everything you don't agree with. That's what Nancy and Buddy have been managing. According to the solid participants, they'd get into those heated debates sometimes for weeks once, as it wasn't just light teasing or friendly banter, it changed into extreme notwithstanding the anxiety. Both actors stayed expert on set. They needed to the display, became a huge fulfillment, pulling in thousands and thousands of visitors each week for whilst it turned into the #1 show on TV, and its recognition did not fade effortlessly. Humans loved the Clampetts in their antics, and as lots as Nancy and Buddy may have disagreed in actual life, they delivered their characters to life perfectly. Nanny's Miss Jane have become one of the maximum beloved characters at the show. She wasn't flashy or over the top, but she changed into relatable. She changed into the sort of individual who worked difficult, attempted to do the proper thing, and continually regarded to get stuck in the center of someone else's mess. And at the same time as her way down on, Jethro might have been performed for laughs. There was something sweet about it too. Meanwhile, Buddy's Jed turned into the steady hand guiding the Clampetts through one ridiculous state of affairs after every other, whether or not he becomes seeking to make sense of Beverly Hills high society or assisting Granny cook up every other batch of moonshine Jed continually stored. His cool, it's no wonder humans tuned in week after week to look what the Clampetts could do. Subsequent. However, in spite of all of the success, the tension between Nancy and Buddy never clearly went away. Some say it got worse, because the show went on. It wasn't just politics, it became a conflict of personalities. Nancy changed into sharp highbrow and did not backpedal from a fight, but he changed into charming positive, but he may also be stubborn. Whilst the one's forces collided, sparks flew, it didn't assist that the display kept them in close quarters as Miss Jane and Jed. They shared lots of scenes collectively, and while they might have smiled and laughed on display screen, there was an undercurrent of frustration. That individuals who have been paying interest could not forget about Donna. Douglas, who played Ellie Mae, as soon as stated they'd argue for weeks about their differing perspectives. Can you believe how annoying that set need to have been? Still, they have been each specialists, and they didn't let their disagreements ruin the show. This is not to mention it was clean, even though retaining matters civil whilst running so intently with a person you clash with takes attempt. However, they pulled it off, and the audience in no way saw the anxiety that bubbled beneath the surface. By the point the Beverly Hillbillies ended its run, it had turned out to be a cultural phenomenon. People nevertheless communicate approximately it nowadays, and it's have an impact on may be visible in infinite other suggests for Nancy and Buddy. Though the stop of the display didn't mean the quit of their story, their differences might hold to shape how they interacted even after the cameras stopped rolling. Nancy decided to pursue a very new route, politics, in 1984. Years after the show wrapped, Sharon for a seat in the US House of Representatives. She became 62 at the time. And at the same time as some humans wondered if an actress may want to make the leap into politics, Nancy believed she ought to carry something precious to the desk after all. Ronald Reagan had completed it, hadn't he? Nancy ran as a Democrat in Pennsylvania's 9th Congressional District. It turned into a hard race from the begin. The district turned into solidly Republican, and her opponent Bud Schuster had already served 6 terms. But Nancy wasn't one to go into reverse from a challenge. She campaigned hard, connecting with people and sharing her thoughts for trade. Even though she knew the odds have been towards her, she gave it her all. What she didn't count on was for Buddy. Ebsen tossed Ep into the combat. And now, not on her face it Buddy, who had no ties to Pennsylvania. Or the race volunteered to report a radio ad for her opponent in the advert. He called Nancy too liberal and accused her of the use of her celebrity status. To sway voters, it wasn't only a war of words, it turned into personal. Nancy felt blindsided. 4 years she and Buddy had butted heads, but this felt like a betrayal on an entire new degree. Nancy did not maintain lower back when she spoke approximately. It later, she said friend had no commercial enterprise getting worried and must have stayed out of it. He's now not the kindly antique Jed Clampett, which you saw on the show, she said in one interview. Certainly pissed off. She additionally made it clean that whilst that they had in no way gotten along, she might have never executed something like that to him. You can listen the harm in her words. Even years after the truth, the ad didn't assist Nanny's marketing campaign. In reality, it might have hurt. She misplaced the election by means of a good-sized margin, along with her opponent taking greater than 66% of the vote. Later on, Nancy said she didn't blame Powell for her defeat. However, the sting of his actions stayed together with her. She left Pennsylvania for a while to clear her head, returning only after she'd had time to method what had took place. Powell, for his component, did not appear to regret his actions. At the time, he firmly believed in what he'd said about Nancy and stood by way of it. But as the years passed, it seems even he started out to sense a few remorse toward the end of his lifestyles. He expressed remorse over the ad and the manner their feud had spiraled out of manage. Unluckily, with the aid of, then it become too overdue to fully mend their relationship. Nancy and friend had very little touch after the marketing campaign, and when they did reconcile, it became brief. Nancy determined solace in teaching a passion that allowed her to channel her information and enjoy into something significant. She have become an artist and residence at Juniata College, a small liberal arts school nestled in Pennsylvania's quiet countryside. There, she taught performing instructions and inspired endless college students who came through her schoolroom, doorways her time at Juniata regarded to mark a non-violent bankruptcy in her existence far away from the intense lights of Hollywood and the turbulence of politics. Nancy observed a community that valued her for her perception and heat. Students later spoke about how an awful lot they well known her not just for her Hollywood fame, but for her determination to assisting others. She introduced humor and coronary heart to her training, making her college students sense that the stage can be a place for each person. No matter in which they got here from, it's easy to assume. Her smiling as she shared tales of her days on the Beverly Hillbillies, sprinkling in advice approximately existence, both on and stale the level. Nancy additionally frolicked, appearing in local theatre productions and occasionally made guest appearances. On TV, she never completely stepped far away from appearing at the same time as she shifted her focus to teaching. It became clear she cherished the craft, and her later paintings contemplated a deep appreciation for the energy of storytelling. But she failed to simply act, she lived a complete and vibrant existence out of doors. The highlight Nancy had a knack for connecting with human beings nicely, whether it changed into her students' buddies or acquaintances, and she or he made the most of her time. In 1990, however, Nancy confronted a brand new mission whilst she was recognized with most cancers. Regardless of the analysis, she remained as determined as ever, continuing to educate and stay lively in her community for as lengthy as her fitness allowed. Friends and colleagues described her as brave and robust qualities. She had proven. At some stage in her life, she passed away in 1991, leaving at the back of a legacy that went some distance beyond her position as Miss Jane Hathaway. The Big Apple's tale, become one among staying power, creativity, and a refusal to be described through one bankruptcy of her existence. Pal Ebsen, in the meantime, had his very own path in those later years. Even though he stayed in the enjoyment industry, his paintings bogged down as he aged. After the Beverly Hillbillies ended, Friend kept appearing, taking roles in films and television shows. He even starred in a popular detective series known as Barnaby Jones, which ran for several years and stored him within the public eye. But irrespective of what he did, human beings could not assist but accomplice him with Jed Clampett. That character, with his homespun allure and iconic catchphrase, had come to be larger than life, but he did not seem to thoughts the affiliation, at the least not outwardly. He embraced the love fanatics had for Jed, even if it's supposed now and again being typecast. But privately, it wasn't continually easy. Consider building a career full of variety and expertise. Best to be remembered for one role. Nonetheless, Friend dealt with it with grace, regularly acting at occasions and interviews in which he happily reminisced approximately his time on the Beverly Hillbillies. He wrote a memoir, later in existence, sharing tales about Hollywood, his career, and sure, even the infamous feud with Nancy. Out of doors of acting, Friend had masses. To preserve him busy, he changed into an executed sailor and spent a great deal of his unfastened time on the water. He also dabbled in writing, penning novels that gave him an innovative outlet beyond acting. Friend had usually been a person of many abilities, and he discovered approaches to live lively and engaged even as the years went with the aid of in his non-public life buddy, loved an extended marriage to Dorothy, not his third wife, and spent his later years surrounded through family. He lived to the fantastic age of 5, passing away in 2003, by means of then most of his contemporaries had been lengthy long past, and had become one of the last residing connections. The golden age of television. His death marked the quit of technology, but his legacy lived on through the infinite reruns of the Beverly Hillbillies, and the recollections of folks who had worked with him. Looking again, their tale feels like a collision of sturdy personalities who just could not locate common ground. They have been each passionate, talented, and fiercely opinionated, and their differences created a rift that was difficult to bridge. Nonetheless, it is impossible to ignore the magic they created together on display as Jed and Miss Janethy added laughter and warmth to hundreds of thousands of viewers, a testament to their professionalism and talent.